The mornings in Portland begin as the city wakes up with the hum of traffic, the bustle of commuters, but for thousands of residents, the dawn breaks not in warm homes, but beneath threadbare tents scattered across bleak sidewalks. This is a reality unknown to many, a side of Oregon where every bench, every corner in Oregon's streets holds stories of endurance, heartbreak, and survival. In this video, we delve beyond mere numbers to meet the faces behind the crisis, sharing their struggles and resilience. We invite you to journey deep into their lives, to understand that homelessness is far more than just statistics. It's about real people with real stories. Join us as we step into this world and uncover what it truly means to be homeless in the Pacific Northwest. Oregon's hidden homelessness crisis. In 2025, Oregon faces a homelessness crisis that's impossible to ignore. With roughly 1 in every 200 residents experiencing homelessness, the state counts nearly 22,875 people without stable housing. This alarming figure places Oregon as the 8th highest in the entire United States for homelessness rates, a stark reminder that this is not a problem confined to a few isolated communities. Homelessness here is a widespread, visible crisis affecting urban centers, suburbs, and even rural areas alike. It's a harsh reality unfolding on street corners, in parks, and under bridges. Far from being hidden or forgotten, these numbers represent real people, families, veterans, children, struggling to survive in a system that often overlooks their plight. Understanding the depth of this crisis is the first step toward meaningful change. It demands our attention, empathy, and action. If you want to stay informed and help amplify these critical stories, please hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support keeps the conversation alive and pushes for the change so many desperately need. The reality of homelessness in Oregon. Homelessness in Oregon is far from evenly distributed. Nearly half of the state's homeless population is concentrated in Portland, the largest city and economic hub. Walking through Portland's streets, the sight is impossible to ignore: sidewalks lined with tents, public parks transformed into sprawling encampments, and makeshift communities emerging where once there were families and workers. This visible crisis paints a stark picture of urban struggle, where housing costs soar and social safety nets struggle to keep pace. But Portland is not alone. Smaller cities like Salem, Eugene, and Bend have witnessed alarming increases in homelessness, signaling that the issue is no longer confined to major metropolitan areas. These communities, once considered immune to such challenges, now grapple with tent cities, overcrowded shelters, and people forced to live in their vehicles or on the streets. Beyond the cities, rural towns and remote areas face their own battles with homelessness, often lacking the resources and infrastructure to adequately support those in need. Yearly point-in-time counts confirm a troubling trend. The spread of homelessness is growing, reaching deeper into the heart of Oregon, as housing becomes less affordable and economic pressures mount. The crisis continues to stretch beyond urban centers, demanding a statewide response that addresses both immediate needs and systemic causes. Current policy and Oregon government efforts. Current policies addressing homelessness in Oregon reveal a troubling pattern of short-term fixes that fail to tackle the root causes of the crisis. Emergency shelters, temporary housing programs, and other stopgap measures, while necessary in moments of acute need, often act like putting duct tape on a sinking ship, providing superficial relief but no lasting solution. This cycle of reactive response tends to generate bursts of public attention whenever homelessness hits the headlines, only for that urgency to fade quickly, leaving systemic problems unaddressed. Despite significant funding, amounting to hundreds of millions of dollars, poured into these programs, the day-to-day realities for those experiencing homelessness remain largely unchanged. Many find themselves caught in a labyrinth of red tape, struggling against complex eligibility criteria and bureaucratic hurdles that can be more daunting than homelessness itself. This disconnect between policy intent and lived experience has fostered growing frustration among advocates and those affected alike. In recognition of the crisis's severity, Oregon has officially extended its state of emergency on homelessness through January 2026, signaling a sustained commitment at the highest levels. The state has allocated over $500 million toward emergency shelters, rental assistance programs, and essential supportive services aimed at stabilizing vulnerable populations. Legislative efforts, such as House Bill 3644, promote a coordinated regional approach by requiring counties and cities to collaborate on comprehensive, tailored plans that address homelessness with greater flexibility and targeted funding. On paper, these initiatives represent promising steps forward, emphasizing local empowerment and strategic intervention in the hardest-hit areas. Yet, the question remains whether these plans can move beyond good intentions and paperwork to produce meaningful change on the streets. The reality experienced by thousands still struggling to find safe shelter calls for a critical examination of the gap between policy and practice. Harsh reality in real life. Despite significant funding and public awareness, the harsh reality for many experiencing homelessness in Oregon remains grim. Thousands still sleep on the streets, inside cars, or in makeshift shelters that offer little protection from the elements. Emergency housing programs often struggle with overcrowding, limited availability, and strict eligibility requirements that make access difficult for those who need help most. For many, the maze of paperwork and bureaucratic hurdles feels more daunting than the uncertainty of life outside. At the same time, local governments have implemented laws aimed at managing visible homelessness, such as camping bans and sit-lie ordinances that prohibit sitting or lying down in certain public spaces. While these policies are frequently framed as efforts to maintain public order and safety, in reality, they often displace vulnerable individuals without providing meaningful alternatives. Police sweeps remove tents and belongings, pushing people into less visible, more dangerous areas where support services are scarce. These measures can give the appearance of action, but often serve to hide the problem rather than solve it. The cycle continues. People are moved from one place to another, but the root causes remain unaddressed. This raises tough questions. Are we simply trying to erase the visibility of homelessness to protect public image? And more importantly, how can a community truly claim progress if its most vulnerable are constantly being pushed to the margins? What do you think are the real obstacles preventing lasting solutions to homelessness? How should cities balance public order with compassion and support for those without homes? Homelessness is a public health crisis. Homelessness is not only a social and economic crisis, it has become a serious public health emergency, especially in places like Portland. In late 2024, the city faced a devastating outbreak of dysentery among its homeless population, a stark reminder of the dangers posed by inadequate access to clean water, sanitation, and health care. Without basic hygiene facilities, people living on the streets are highly vulnerable to infectious diseases, which can spread rapidly in crowded encampments and shelters. The impact goes far beyond those directly affected. Diseases do not stay confined to the homeless community, they ripple outward, threatening schools, hospitals, and the broader public health system. Children experiencing homelessness bear an especially heavy burden. Not only do they face increased risks of physical illness, but the instability of their living conditions deeply affects their mental health and academic performance. Chronic stress, anxiety, and lack of a safe environment make it nearly impossible for many to thrive in school or maintain a sense of normalcy. This cycle of hardship risks perpetuating inequality for generations to come. As communities grapple with this intertwined health and housing crisis, the question becomes, how can we ensure that access to clean water, sanitation, and healthcare is treated as a fundamental right for all, regardless of where someone sleeps at night? What steps can we take to protect not only the homeless population, but the health of the entire community? Impacts on Oregon's society and economy. Social and economic impact. The social and economic impacts of the homeless in Oregon extend far beyond those who are directly affected. Rising crime rates in various neighborhoods are often tied to desperation rather than any inherent violence among the homeless in Oregon. Hunger, mental health challenges, and the basic instinct to survive sometimes lead to behaviors that place stress on community safety. It's important to recognize these actions not as personal failings, but as symptoms of deeper systemic breakdowns. Meanwhile, local businesses frequently shutter as customer foot traffic decreases and safety concerns grow, while tourism declines as visitors choose destinations they perceive as safer. These changes fracture long-standing communities, breeding fear and resentment among residents. Property values drop, compounding economic hardship and feeding a cycle of neglect and disinvestment. Homelessness in Oregon is not simply an issue confined to those living on the streets. It affects every layer of society, from workers to families and businesses. It's a community-wide challenge that requires collective action. As the crisis deepens, social cohesion weakens, eroding trust and shared responsibility within neighborhoods. Distribution and area of influence. Geographically, Portland shoulders the greatest burden, with over 11,000 homeless in Oregon concentrated in hotspots such as Old Town, Laurel Hist Park, and East Portland. However, the homeless crisis is not exclusive to Portland. Smaller cities like Eugene, Springfield, Salem, Bend, and Redmond are seeing their homeless populations grow rapidly, putting strain on their limited resources. Even rural areas, once considered insulated from such urban issues, are now facing the harsh realities of displacement and housing insecurity, as rising living costs push residents outward. This expanding distribution highlights the complexity and scale of homelessness in Oregon. The issue crosses traditional urban boundaries, infiltrating communities that previously appeared unaffected and challenging policymakers to rethink and adapt their strategies. Grasping the social and economic consequences across these diverse environments is crucial as we move to explore the underlying causes and wider context fueling the ongoing crisis of homelessness in Oregon. Causes and underlying context of homelessness in Oregon. One of the most pressing underlying causes of homelessness in Oregon is the skyrocketing cost of housing. For many minimum wage workers, the reality is grim. They must work nearly 75 hours a week just to afford a modest one-bedroom apartment. This staggering imbalance between wages and housing costs pushes countless people to the brink, forcing them into unstable living situations or the streets altogether. But financial strain is only part of the story. Mental health challenges and substance use disorders compound the crisis, creating barriers that are difficult to overcome without consistent, accessible support. Unfortunately, the services designed to help often fall short, underfunded, fragmented, and mired in bureaucratic red tape that deters those most in need from seeking assistance. This patchwork system lacks the cohesion required to provide timely, effective care. Moreover, systemic racism and deep-rooted inequalities disproportionately affect communities of color, who face higher rates of eviction, discrimination in housing markets, and fewer opportunities for economic advancement. These structural injustices are far from relics of the past. They actively shape who becomes homeless today. Meanwhile, decades of budget cuts and political gridlock have eroded the social safety nets that once served as a vital buffer for vulnerable populations. Programs that used to prevent people from falling into homelessness have weakened or disappeared entirely, leaving many without a lifeline. Addressing these intertwined causes requires more than temporary fixes. It demands bold, coordinated action that tackles affordability, healthcare, and inequality head-on. As the crisis deepens, The question becomes, how can Oregon reshape its approach to homelessness and offer real, lasting solutions? Proposed solution and call to action. Housing isn't a privilege reserved for a few. It's a fundamental human right that every person deserves. To truly tackle homelessness, we must shift our mindset and policies toward this truth. One of the most urgent steps is ramping up the construction of affordable housing. This means incentivizing private developers to prioritize low-income units and creating strong safeguards to prevent gentrification from pushing vulnerable residents out of their neighborhoods. Without affordable options, all other efforts are mere band-aids. At the same time, adopting a housing-first approach is critical. This model provides permanent housing without preconditions, eliminating the red tape and barriers that often discourage people from seeking help. Housing alone isn't enough, though. Mental health care and addiction recovery services need to be integrated directly into housing programs so individuals can begin healing in a stable environment. Beyond housing, practical job training and placement programs offering living wages are essential for long-term stability. People experiencing homelessness deserve more than temporary fixes. They need clear, supported pathways into meaningful employment. Solving this crisis also requires genuine partnerships. Government agencies, nonprofits, businesses, and communities must all share responsibility and work collaboratively. And at the heart of change lies a cultural shift from exclusion and judgment toward empathy, dignity, and hope. What do you think is the biggest barrier to ending homelessness in your community? Share your thoughts below. We want to hear your ideas and experiences. Conclusion and message to everyone. Homelessness is not a personal failure. It is a reflection of systemic breakdowns we've long ignored. We keep shuffling people from one place to another, patching the problem instead of fixing it. Oregon has the resources, yet what's missing is the collective will to act decisively. Real change demands more than funding. It calls for relentless pressure on leaders, institutions, and every one of us to share responsibility. Until homelessness becomes unacceptable everywhere, not just out of sight, it will persist as a wound in our communities. This crisis challenges our humanity and forces us to ask, how can we claim progress if millions still have nowhere to call home? What will it take for us to move beyond indifference and truly embrace compassion? Share your thoughts. How do you think we can break the cycle and create lasting change?